My wife picked up a console today for about $10, and this is my wife Tiana, and we're gonna see if we can refinish this. So Tiana has sanded this whole thing down. It is particle board, so we will be painting most of it. And this is Tiana with her projects. She wants me to make a design on these doors, and I'm thinking about making an arrow. The first thing I do is find out how thick the arrow needs to be so that it recesses within the frame of the door. Let's head on over to my scrap pile and find an arrow. This looks like a good piece here. Alright, so this piece is going to actually work perfectly. I can split it in half. It also happens to be square already, so I don't have to do any milling to square this piece up. I raise my table saw blade. I then adjust my fence to 2 inches. I then prepare for the apocalypse. I then run our piece of wood through the table saw to split it in half and get the 2-inch dimension that I'm looking for. I then run the offcut of that first cut through the table saw to make that 2 inches wide. I then adjust my fence so that I can rip this piece of wood into the thickness that I require. And then I send this piece of wood through the table saw to rip it in half, using a scrap piece of wood to keep it pressed against the fence. I then had to get a different piece of scrap wood because the first piece was actually the second part of our arrow. I proceed to rip this piece down to the correct thickness. This is the offcut of the first piece. Then I take our second piece for the second set of arrows and rip it in half as well. Then I run the last piece, the second offcut, through the table saw to rip it down to the correct thickness. Now we have 4 pieces of wood, the same length, width, and thickness. I'll then measure to find the halfway point on the door and then figure out what I'm going to do with this arrow. I set my miter saw to 45 degrees so that I can make the first cut, and it ended up being 46 degrees so that I could line up with the halfway point notch that we made earlier. Alright, so I cut the first cut at 46 degrees and the second cut at 45 degrees. I cut the second piece of the arrow at 46 degrees, and then I'll use my pencil to find out where I need to cut the next angle. So I cut this angle at 45 degrees, but it did not fit, so I placed the first arrow piece on top of the second and then just drew a line, and this ended up being the most accurate way to make this cut. I then adjusted my miter saw and cut on the line. Alright, now let's see if this fits. Looking good, and voila, we have an arrow. Now repeat those steps and make a second arrow. I then glued the arrows and proceeded to clamp them down, and I'm not going to show you all the fumbling that I did with these clamps, but I'll let you see the finished result. Now, as I let the glue dry on the doors, my wife came in and painted the console, and I will let her take over from here.
Hi, I'm Tiana, and that's me picking up the paint gun, getting ready to paint. All I did was do fast, even strokes up and down to kind of get that first cut on there. I usually do all the painting and all of the sanding. I do all the hard work basically. I'm painting up and down and fast, even strokes so that there's no splotchiness and no runs. I want to get it as perfect as possible. I like to try to do everything quick and in 2 coats if I can. So I'm very meticulous about the first coat because I think that's important. If you do linger for too long, you will cause running, and that's something you don't want. It can mess up the entire finish. So here we flipped it over after the first coat dried so I can apply the second paint and get areas that are kind of hard to get when it's right side up. So here I had to get out my paintbrush and start painting inside the creases and all the little spots that the gun couldn't reach or would have caused runniness. So this is just me painting and getting all the little corners and creases. It took me about 3 coats to get everything nice and even, and you just take your time painting and making sure that it all matches up in the end. So this is me showing you guys the end result after I got done staining. I stained it a Minwax True Black because it is particle board, so I wanted to kind of cover up any flaws, and I gave it a little distressed look, and this is the end result.
As you can see, this is the final product. Unfortunately, our audio cut out of this last video recording, but you can see that Tiana spray painted the hardware with a matte black Rust-Oleum spray paint, and you can also see that the paint looks very good where she sprayed everything. There aren't any brush strokes anywhere, The top also was clear coated, so it's extremely smooth and it's a very beautiful project. And thank you for watching.